In the scriptural justice system, the highest of the high, the Most High, Yah, is the judge and jury, and the seed of Israel are his children. These are their stories. Banks stands before a wall covered with names, layers upon layers, African names crossed out, slave names written over them, modern names covering those. At the centre, one name circled in red, Israel. The team assembled. Banks' identity theft. We've talked about it, but we haven't talked about the depth of it, the planning, the coordination, the centuries-long conspiracy. She writes in massive letters, Psalm 83:4, "They have said, 'Come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance.'" This isn't passive forgetting. This is active warfare. Come, let US, plural, cut them off, deliberate action. That the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. Total erasure. She turns to the team. For 400 years, multiple nations, multiple systems, multiple institutions, all working together toward one goal. Make them forget they're Israel. And we're going to document exactly how they did it. Banks presents the full context of Psalm 83. Banks' Psalm 83 isn't just verse 4. It's a complete prophecy about what would happen to Israel. Let me read verses 1 to 8. She reads, "Keep not thou silence, O God. Hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, 'Come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. The tabernacles of Edom and the Ishmaelites, of Moab and the Hagarenes, Gebal and Ammon and Amalek, the Philistines with the inhabitants of Tyre, Assur also is joined with them. Riley, crafty counsel, consulted together, confederate against thee. This is describing organized conspiracy. Banks, yes, multiple nations, with one consent, working together, against God's people, with one specific goal, erase the name of Israel from memory. Okafor, who are these nations? Edom, Moab, Amalek, Banks, ancient enemies of Israel. But the prophecy isn't just historical, it's future. These represent the nations that would conspire against scattered Israel. She pulls up a map showing the transatlantic slave trade routes. Portugal, Spain, Britain, France, Netherlands, America, Arab nations, all confederate, working together in the slave trade. All with one consent, profit from their labor and erase their identity. So Psalm 83 predicted the slave trade conspiracy? Banks, it predicted that multiple nations would conspire to cut Israel off from being a nation and erase their name from memory. The slave trade is the fulfillment. Now let's document exactly how they did it. Research Lab, Day. Riley presents a comprehensive breakdown of the conspiracy stages. The erasure happened in systematic stages, each designed to strip away another layer of identity until nothing remained but what the master wanted them to be. He projects a detailed timeline. The 6 stages of name erasure. Stage 1, capture and renaming, 1500s to 1800s. What happened? Captured Africans immediately stripped of birth names, given numbers, European names or mocking names by slave traders, families separated to prevent name transmission. Multiple tribes' language groups mixed on ships to prevent communication. Documentation. Slave ship manifests show European names only. John, Mary, George, Betty. No African names recorded in colonial documents. No mention of tribal affiliations. No record of Hebrew identity despite documented Hebrew practices. Purpose. Immediate disconnection from ancestral identity. Cannot pass down family history if you don't know your real name. Cannot organize resistance if you can't communicate with fellow captives. Riley, first layer strip, personal and family names. Stuk, stage 2, middle passage, breaking communal memory. Ships, 1502 to 1865. What happened? Families deliberately separated, children from parents, husbands from wives, different language speakers mixed together, branded with owner's mark, literal ownership on flesh. Those who tried to maintain African language or identity were beaten, communication reduced to survival basics only. Documentation. Slave trader records explicitly describe separation strategy. Insurance documents show cargo organized to prevent combination organizing. Ship logs note punishment for speaking in native tongue. Here's a direct quote from a Portuguese slave trader, 1640. She reads from a document, "It is essential to mix the various tribes and tongues so they cannot conspire. A slave who cannot speak to his fellow is a slave who cannot rebel. Within one generation, they will have forgotten their mother tongue entirely." Riley, within one generation, they will have forgotten. Deliberate strategy. Purpose, break ability to transmit culture orally, prevent collective memory from forming, ensure next generation born in bondage knows nothing of origin. Riley. Second layer stripped, communal memory and language. Stage 3, plantation, legal name theft, 1600s to 1865. What happened? Enslaved people legally given their master's surname, birth records, sale records, property records, listed with slave master's name. Children automatically inherited master's name, not father's name. Marriage between enslaved people not legally recognized, no family names passed down legally. Any attempt to use African or ancestral names was punished. Chen, entering with documents. Look at these plantation records from Virginia, 1790. He shows ledgers. Property of Thomas Jefferson, Negro boy Isaac, age 12, Negro woman Sally, age 18, Negro man James, James, third of Hemmings, Jefferson's wife's maiden name. They're listed as property first, people second, and the surname is the owner's property marker. Riley. And look at this. South Carolina law, 1740. He projects the law. No slave shall be permitted to keep or use any name other than that given by his master. Any slave found using a name from his native country or claiming descent from any African tribe shall receive 39 lashes. Awful. They literally made it illegal to remember your own name. Purpose. Legal ownership extended to identity itself. Erase connection to Africa, to tribe, to ancestry. Make the enslaved person's entire identity dependent on the master. Third layer stripped. Legal identity and family names. Stage 4. Post-emancipation imposed designations, 1865 to 1960s. What happened? Formerly enslaved people forced to choose surnames for legal documents. Most chose master's surname, only name they knew. Government designated them Negro on all official documents. Later colored, never listed as Hebrew, Israelite, or by specific African tribal origin. Census, birth certificates, death certificates all say Negro or colored. Banks entering. Look at this, US. Census categories over time. She projects census racial categories. 1870 census, white, black, mulatto, Chinese, Indian. 1890 census, white, black, mulatto, quadroon, octoroon, Chinese, Japanese, Indian. 1930 census, white, Negro, Mexican, Indian, Chinese, Japanese. 1960 census, white, Negro, Indian, Japanese, Chinese, Filipino. 1980 census, white, black, Negro, Indian, Asian, Pacific Islander. 2000 census, white, black, African American, Indian, Asian banks. Notice, never Hebrew, never Israelite, never by specific tribe, always generic, Negro, black, African American, Riley. Because if the census listed them as Hebrew or Israelite, questions would be asked, identity would be preserved. Okafor, a Negro means what? Spanish for black. It's a color, not a nationality, not a people group, a descriptor. Banks, exactly. You can't be a nation if you're just a color. Psalm 83:4. Cut them off from being a nation. Purpose. Prevent national identity, reduce them to racial category only, block them from claiming specific ancestry or covenant, Riley. Fourth layer stripped. National identity. Stage 5. Religious miseducation. Spiritual name theft. 1600s present. What happened? Christianity forced upon enslaved people but heavily edited, taught that Israelites were white Middle Eastern, not black. Images of white Jesus, white Moses, white disciples. Never taught Deuteronomy 28 curses in black churches. Never taught that curses applied to them specifically. Taught to wait on the Lord and turn the other cheek, submission theology. Any teaching about true Hebrew identity suppressed. Okafor. Here's where the conspiracy gets truly insidious. The church became the primary tool of name erasure. She shows historical documents from slave era. Slave catechism. 1845, taught to enslaved people, who gave you a master and a mistress? Who says you must obey them? God says I must. What book tells you these things? the Bible. But they were never allowed to read the Bible themselves. It was illegal to teach enslaved people to read. Riley. Because if they read Deuteronomy 28, they'd recognize themselves. If they read Exodus, they'd know God delivers his people from bondage. If they read Revelation, they'd know their identity is hidden but will be revealed. Banks, look at this. Virginia Law 1819. She projects, if any white person assemble with Negroes for the purpose of instructing them to read or write, he or she shall be fined not exceeding $50 and imprisoned not exceeding 2 months. They made it a crime to teach them to read. Why? Because literacy equals access to Scripture, and Scripture reveals identity. But after slavery ended, couldn't they just read the Bible themselves? Banks, they could. But by then, the damage was done. 3 generations had been raised under white Christianity. The images were set. White Jesus, white Moses. The theology was internalized. We're cursed because of Ham. We're suffering because we're sinners. Never we're suffering because we're Israel under judgment. Okafor. And the black church, which should have been the place of truth, continued teaching the same doctrine. Because the preachers learned from white seminaries, read books by white theologians, taught from curriculums designed by white denominations. The spiritual name theft was the most complete. Because even when they could read, they couldn't see. The programming was too deep. Purpose, spiritual disconnection from true identity, use religion as control mechanism, prevent them from accessing biblical prophecies about themselves, make them believe their suffering was their fault, not prophetic judgment. 5th layer stripped, spiritual identity and covenant knowledge. Stage 6, modern identity confusion, 1960s present. What happened? Civil rights movement, self-identified as black, 1980s, 1990s, adopted African American. Some sought identity in Islam, Nation of Islam, Orthodox Islam. Some sought identity in African spirituality, returning to pre-Islamic African religions. Some sought identity in Hebrew Israelite camps, closest to truth, but mainstream still identified by color or continent, not by true name. Even attempts to reclaim identity were misdirected, because the true name, Israel, was still forgotten.